Paul Prestopino was a musician, inventor, and technician with a long and varied career. But from 1970 until its closure in 1989, Paul was a technician at the record plant in New York City, a venerated studio that helped produce an endless stream of hit records and launched dozens of careers for the engineers and producers that worked there. While working at the studio, Paul, known to everyone as Presto, was charged with the maintenance and care of the recording equipment, but he also played on dozens of albums for bands like Aerosmith, The Hooters, Alice Cooper, Slade, and Edgar Winter. He was an integral member of the bands of Peter, Paul and Mary, John Denver, and the Chad Mitchell Trio. Paul was part of the lifeblood of the record plant, and his passing in 2023 was felt deeply by those who worked with him at the studio.
Paul was willing to do anything. You know, he was an incredible musician, but if it was something odd to be done, he was always up for it, and he would come in with a smile with whatever gear we needed. You know, he'd come in with a mandolin, or he would come in with a guitar or a banjo. And the one really cool one I remember is on the Aerosmith record. He played slide banjo, which is really unusual.
Oh yeah.
And he doubled Brad's line on Last Child, which is like, you know, for fans of Aerosmith, it's always been, hey, what is that? You know, it's like
Prestopino.
It's not just a guitar; it's like something else. And we had him playing stuff on Back in the Saddle, and he played acoustic on any number of projects I was doing. He was a constant go-to guy for us. You know, we would always try to do a little bit more on Aerosmith albums that so would disguise the original sounds. For example, Jay playing vibes. Marimba, right? Bass marimba on Sweet Emotion, double bass line. He doubled perfectly. You know, this is pre-Pro Tools. He just locked it. And again, that gave you a bass sound that you couldn't figure out. It was so high you had to stand on a ladder to play it.
Did you say I was so high I had to stand on a?
Well, that too. Oh God.
Hey, and Jack, what was that? The track that? Remember we used John Lennon's guitar, that big 7-foot.
Yeah, that was on Back in the Saddle.
Oh, and there was 3, and Paul was one of those.
Yeah, Paul was one of those. Yeah.
So, you know, when you brought him in to do these sessions, I mean, he was pretty much a stone cold bluegrass folk musician, right? Was it odd for him to come in and work on rock and roll records, or did he just accept it?
Yeah, he totally accepted it. He was like, what do you need? What do you want?
Fabulous. That's so great.
Come in with his toys and just do it. And the musicians, whether it be the guys in Cheap Trick or Aerosmith or whoever we were working with, they all loved him. I mean, if Paul was going to come in on a session, it was always going to be a lot of sunshine.
That's great.
What impressed me about, now I knew that Presto made all these things at the record plant, but one of the things that impressed me was just that I know that he played with all these people that I knew, like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and like I still see him on those PBS specials that are 20 years old now, and the Mitchell Trio, and I didn't find out until after he passed, but he was in the Greenbrier Boys, which is one of the seminal bluegrass bands of the folk era there in New York, and it just I was really impressed with that. He had at his station in the shop where he worked at his bench, he had his gold Aerosmith award above his bench there. It was so cool.
Only maintenance engineer I ever saw that had a platinum record hanging over his workbench.
Right.
Hey, I worked on an Aerosmith record. I didn't get a platinum record.
He worked on the Hooters record. He was the one who played banjo.
Right.
And John, you and Bill recorded that.
And we danced. I think so. And then he also played on like the third Hooters record, which when I was the engineer, he played dobro. But yeah, no, he definitely Yeah, I went through his discography this morning, and I was like, oh, right, I remember that. And it was pretty amazing. And then I guess he was in the And We Dance video when they did the music video.
In the intro. It's great.
But yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Classic overalls. He's one of the original, like, back in the 50s when there were clubs in Manhattan that had, someone on bongos and someone on acoustic. And it was like...
beatniks.
Yeah. Paul was one of the originals.
Yeah, and he has a gold record for Blue Oyster Cult.
Yep.
Not for playing. That one actually was for an edit. He did an edit on Beat the Reaper that made the song, and he got a gold record for it.
That is ridiculously amazing. Oh my God, that is funny. He added more cowbell.
Right.
I know he was gigging in the 60s, but would he run out and do and play?
Yeah, he had a band that he played with called Hold the Mustard. And it was a contra dance band, and they would just play, hoedowns and, weird gigs. And he played with those guys for years and years and years. In fact, I remember one time in the late days, Tom Swift even came in and, he brought the band in to record them.
Oh, wow.
And I remember that happening specifically, wow, Presto was in a band, and my first introduction to Presto was that credit on the back of Rocks. That's why I knew exactly what it was.
Wow.
I remember reading it in my room, and then all of a sudden I remember meeting the actual guy.
Wow.
Because I idolized those records. All those records that were done, and all those people, Shelley and Jay and Jack. I knew everything about that from reading those credits. And Presto, I remember meeting him and being like, this can't possibly be the same Paul Prestopino. He's a maintenance guy. I figured he'd be like a rock musician, But sure enough, I found out that no, this guy is so multi-talented that, not only can he take apart a tape machine and put it back together again in 30 seconds, but he also can play banjo and mandolin. And
he, in 2019, recorded a record with a band, a bunch of people from New Jersey, the Magnolia Street String Band. And the record was called Wrong Side of the Rain. And I guess he played banjo, dobro, and mandolin.
Paul played at my wedding.
Wow.
And how this happened was I got married up in the Berkshires. And I was looking, we were going to do contra dancing or something. So, I looked for some local musicians, and it turns out they knew Presto. So Presto comes out, comes to my wedding, and he jammed and played with him for the whole thing. And it's like,
wow, man, that's
crazy.
The thing about Paul that was interesting to me after the fact, because I was always in touch with him, is that when Luca was born, I sent you guys that picture. He and Sarah made a quilt for my son Luca.
How cool is that?
Mm.
So Luca decided that he wanted to play fiddle. And when Paul found out about it, he made a CD of all kinds of folk music, Zydeco, Canadian, French, Irish.
Mm.
And so I had, the boys had little music players, and so I put it on a music player, but we had the CD too. And they played those things all the time. And they just, because Paul made these incredible liner notes of who the artist was and what style of music it was, it really left an impression. And so when Luca got his first fiddle, it was a gift. And they just they got involved with local fiddle group. And one of my neighbors knew a lot about bluegrass. And they just came into their own, being able to play. And so that when we came out in 2016, Presto lived not a half hour from my dad in Jersey. So on our way out of town, after I left, say goodbye to my dad, I said, we have to stop by and see Paul before we go. And so I told Paul we were coming. So the boys had their instruments, and the three of them jammed at Paul's house.
Oh, that's great.
It was just so great because Paul was cool enough to play stuff that, and I don't know, somehow they all just played, but it was just so sweet that, that my boys made a connection. Like, I feel like I got Presto's kids.
Right.
Well, that's a really beautiful connection that no one we've spoken to has had, where he actually was in your kid's life.
Yeah, like almost like a grandfather.
But in a musical way, which is kind of amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Shelley, did you ever use him as a musician?
On a few things. My clients needed a player that could play mandolin on one thing, acoustic guitar on something else, and we used Paul. He was just like what you're describing, he lived and ate and breathed this stuff without being stiff.
Yeah.
And if you presented him with a problem or something that needed to be fixed, he would just go about it in his own natural way.
The fact that he was a musician, how much of a factor do you think that was to his understanding of, or his desire to be around the recording environment?
Well, I think that what it enabled him to do is feel completely comfortable, because he always knew what the client needed.
Right.
Client needed to keep the session going. Client needed confidence. The engineer needed to know that it was going to be okay and that there was solutions.
Yeah, he didn't want to be the groove buster.
Right. Because he was familiar with both sides of the glass, I think just through that understanding made him complete and made him so comfortable to have him around and solve these issues. And you could count on him. He was one of these guys that no one ever said, I don't know if he's going to show up. I don't know if he said he'd do it, but maybe he was just being nice. It was never even a thought or a question. He would just always be there.
When you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. And that's what it was. He loved that. He loved every aspect of it.
He was happy as a clam doing what he was doing. He never talked about it. We had a lot of fun in the studio, believe me. We had great clients. Roy was amazing. The atmosphere there was amazing. It was a great training ground. Paul was just part of that in the greatest possible way.
All these great records you guys made, he was part of the team. I mean, he might not have been in the room the whole time, but he was backing all of you guys up.
And you knew that if you had a problem, that you weren't going to look bad to your client, because the worst thing that could happen is when your client loses confidence in either the studio or the session or the tech or me as an engineer or anybody else as an engineer, lose confidence. And once that happens, it's all in a tailspin.
Yeah.
And he always had my back.
For extras from the episodes, like playlists, links, and videos, head over to gearclubpodcast.com. Sign up for the newsletter, and come say hi and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Gear Club Podcast. Thanks for listening.
And please, if you like what you hear, let us know and leave a review.
Gear Club Podcast is sponsored by Eventide, and they're running a special promotion just for Gear Club listeners. You can go to store.eventideaudio.com and use the promo code GearClub15 for 15% off your purchase of Eventide products. Some exclusions may apply. Go to GearClubPodcast.com for details. Big thanks to Eventide for their sponsorship and the special promotion.